welcoming us here.
Thank you. Okay. Approval of the agenda. Is there any errors or omissions, or if someone would like to approve that? Deacon Robert? All in favor? I guess I should have said, David emailed me earlier and said he wouldn't be here. Okay, audited financial statements is on our agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So we had the audit committee meet on November 21st to review the 23-24 financial statements, the findings, the management letter, assessment of risk mitigation strategies, as well as the appropriateness of internal controls. MNP was there to do a presentation, and the financial statements were presented to the audit committee by Amanda. As a result of that process, the audit committee recommends to the Board of Trustees that they approve the 23-24 audited financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, and transfers to reserves, along with the unaudited financial statements as presented. So Amanda will present the financial statements for us, as well as management discussion and analysis. So Amanda?
Sure, thank you. My apologies, this might be the second time that some of you around the table have heard the presentation, for those that were part of the audit committee. Derry and I were chatting earlier about how could we liven it up, make it a bit more fresh, so that it was exciting for those people as well. And we talked around the idea of adding some video from, maybe Taylor Swift concert that she just went to, or some jokes from YouTube, but it's just
Donuts would work.
Pardon?
Donuts.
Oh, no? Well, we had small cookies the other day. And Darian finally said, well, Amanda, the statements are exciting enough. Like, we should just go through the statements. I was like, that's a really good idea, Darian. So maybe list your top 3 and we'll go through those. And so she was like, I don't think I can narrow it down to 3. We need 4. And I'm like, okay. So we're actually going to go through 4 statements in the package in front of you. There's far more than that you'll see. But I think the ones that we're going to highlight today are those that are important for you to understand the financial health of the organization. If you've got questions from the other statements, by all means at the end, or whenever you have those questions, please just feel free to ask them at that point in time. So the first statement we'll look at is on page 4. That's our statement of financial position, otherwise known as the balance sheet. The first section there deals with our financial assets, and those are the items that can easily be converted to cash. And so we'll see that our cash balance has decreased by $218,000 from the previous year, and we're sitting at a current balance of $4,996,000. Accounts receivable is anything that's owed to us as an organization from others, and you see the balance of $1,298,000 is a decrease of $1,191,000 from the prior year. The larger balance within this is amounts owed to municipalities relating to the property taxes that they've collected for us, and that's $858,000. Federal government owes us $105,000 relating to our GST rebate, and Alberta Infrastructure owes $180,000 for costs that we've incurred that they'll be reimbursing for the modulars at Whole St. Jean Paul 2. Next are our liabilities, or what do we owe to other individuals or organizations. And so accounts payable is currently sitting at $3,117,000, which is a decrease of $593,000 from the previous year. This line is really 2 types of payables. The first being, like I said, the trade payables. So $789,000 being what we owe back to Alberta Ed relating to that property tax revenue that has been collected on our behalf. We owe back the funding that we've received in duplication of that. Also, the funding that we received was based on enrollment of 272,722 FTE, but in actuality, our enrollment was 2,699. So because our enrollment dropped, our grants were recalculated, and they actually came in $131,000 less under the weighted moving average funding model. So that payable will be repaid back to Alberta Ed over this school year on our funding payments. Receiver General is also owed $409,000, and that's from the payroll run in August, the source deductions that were taken off of employee paychecks. And then the second type of payable in this line is our unearned revenue. So typically near the end of the school year or the start of or over the summer, we'll start collecting fees relating to international ed, where those students aren't able to come into the country until they've paid the tuition that they owe to come, as well as with OSC and our academies. They often pay a registration fee or their first payment prior to the start of the school year. And so because we're not in that specific school year, we record that as a payable or as unearned revenue. Unspent deferred contributions is the next line, and that's at a current balance of $1,868,000. This relates to the grants that we receive that have restrictions placed upon them that need to be spent on specific programming costs. And so it just represents the unspent portion of those grants. And while it looks like we've only had a change of $2,700 from the previous year, there's actually been a bit of movement within there. So if you recall with the McCoy modernization, we were required to commit $251,000 to that project, and we fundraised 236 of it. So that balance has been sitting in there for a couple of years until we received confirmation from the government on how to send that forward. And closer to the end of the year, we received that confirmation and sent the check, and so that has come off of the books. However, it's offset by funding that we've received within IMR and CMR, where the funding we received was $328,000 greater than the cost of the projects that we had within those funding lines. Included in here is also the new curriculum funding, mental health in schools, as well as the Calgary Police Youth Foundation grant. And at the bottom, you'll see our net financial asset value of $281,000. And this is just a line that allows the readers of the financial statements to take a quick pulse on the organization and to know whether or not they're in good financial standings. So with it being a positive value of $281,000, it shows that we would be able to pay any of the amounts that we owe at August 31st with the resources that we have and still have resources left over. The bottom part of the statement is our non-financial assets, or those that can't easily be converted to cash, and the first item being our tangible capital assets. So as a reminder, this is our buildings, equipment, computers, vehicles. When we purchase these items, we don't see an expense hit our statement of operations in 1 year, like we don't record it as an expense all in 1 year, but rather because we'll be using those assets over multiple years, or what's referred to as their useful life, we recognize a portion of that cost throughout its useful life. And so with our tangible capital assets, we can see that we had an increase of $802,000, which is really two numbers offsetting each other. So first we had additions of $2,782,000, and that's not all cash out the door additions. So $1,199,000 of that was directly funded by Alberta Infrastructure, with the majority of that being Holy Trinity Academy. So there's been expenses paid on our behalf by infrastructure behind the scenes. Also a small portion relating to the modulars at Post Jean Paul II. So included in that balance of additions, Holy Trinity Academy, the total project at JP2 for the modulars was $493,000. St. Louis had a boiler project of $152,000. The maintenance department replaced their fleet of trucks for $179,000. Chromebooks across the division were replaced for $155,000, and then the McCoy lab was refurbished for $57,000. Offsetting that is amortization expense of $1,940,000, and that's what causes the overall increase of $802,000. The next line is our prepaid expenditures of $1,109,000. This represents anything that we've paid in advance of the upcoming school year. So typically around that May timeframe, we'll start to purchase supplies for the upcoming school year, or we'll have to pay insurance premiums, software contracts will come due. With staff who are eligible and their health spending accounts, we deposit credits for them into their accounts, and until they use it, it's not recorded as an expense, and so it sits as a prepaid expense. And finally, we have our spent deferred capital contributions. So any grants that we receive where there's restrictions on them, but the restrictions are capital in nature, they'll sit as an unspent contribution and then come here And over the course of the useful life of that asset, we'll recognize revenue, just like we'll be recognizing an expense. So try to diarize that in a bit of a diagram. So if we had a $1 million capital grant that we receive, it'll sit in unspent deferred contributions until the time that we build that building. At that time, the $1 million will move down into spent deferred capital contributions, and we'll also see an increase of $1 million in tangible capital assets. Then if that building has a useful life on paper of 40 years, we would be showing revenue and amortization expense of $25,000 per year for the next 40 years. But we'd also be seeing that balance within spent deferred capital contributions and the net book value of that asset slowly decrease over the 40 years as well. So we get to a balance of zero. The last part of the statement is our net assets, and that value of $3,196,000 is actually comprised of quite a few different balances, and we'll dive deeper into that in just a little bit. It actually has a 2-page schedule that helps explain that balance. There are a few ratios that we can use or look at based on this statement. The first being our working capital per student. This looks at if we took all our financial assets and deducted all of that we owe, and then divided it amongst our student enrollment, what would the value be? But it'd be $101 per student, which means that there would be cash left over, which means we're in a good position. We can, however, see that that value has been decreasing over the last couple of years, and that's consistent across the province too, which with the government's messaging of having to use the reserves, it's not surprising to see those values decrease. But there is also the factor that as we have increasing enrollment, if our reserve balance stayed the same, we would also see a decrease in that number too, just because of our enrollment increasing. The adjusted net financial asset ratio is just another way of looking at this this information, and the value is actually 1.05, which indicates that our assets exceed our liabilities, which is what we're always looking for. But again, you can see here that the values across the province have been declining over the last few years too, as the messaging for using of reserves. The next two ratios just look at our capital assets and are a function of how new or how much we put into them. And so the first one is looking at our buildings, and it would essentially show that if we had built a building this year, it would have a value of 100%, and then over the next 4 years, it would slowly decline to zero. So this just gives you an indicator of where we're at within that continuum, and also where we're at in comparison to the province. So we can see we're slowly declining as our buildings amortize. However, when we're comparing ourselves against other school divisions across the province, or even those of comparable size, our buildings are either newer or have been maintained on a higher frequency. This is the same information, but just looking at what it looks like for equipment and vehicles. And again, with the replacement of the maintenance trucks, we can see that there's been an increase, as well as with the Chromebooks and the lab at McCoy. That was also an injection into this value over the last year. But again, we'll see as those assets start to amortize, we'll see that decrease. I should also say too, like with this ratio, once Holy Trinity Academy comes into inventory, we'll see a big jump in that value as well. Moving on to the statements of operations, which is on page 5 in the package that you're following. Just to highlight again that the budget column you see there is the spring budget that was approved in May of 2023. And at that time, we were coming into the 23-24 financial year with an adjusted accumulated surplus of $1,876,000. So that's what we had in reserves that we would be able to access over the course of the year if we needed to. And that number excludes our SGF. Enrollment at the budget was estimated at 2,665. So again, when we were funded, back in January, we had submitted projections for enrollment of 2,722 FTE. But as we got closer to budget time, new information was available, and that projected declined to 2,665 FTE. We're expecting staff to, teaching staff to be 151.4 FTE and support staff to come in at 149.2 FTE. With that, we would have a deficit of $165,900. Over the course of the year, through quarterly updates, the trustees were advised of several changes, the first being with our enrollment. We had budgeted for 2,665 FTE, but our actual enrollment at the end of for September 30th was 2,699 FTE. So even though it was an increase from the budget, it was still a decrease from what we were funded, and that's why we see the payable of $131,000 for the weighted moving average. There was also $260,000 worth of grants that were announced after the budget had been approved. This included the teacher salary settlement, learning loss, supplemental enrollment growth, digital assessment. CCT saw an uplift, and also the nutrition program received an injection of $60,000. Offsetting that was a decrease of $161,000 in a few grants, and this was largely due to the accounting treatment of them. So again, when we have those grants that are to be used for very specific programming needs, we're not able to recognize that revenue until those expenses have been incurred. So that would include the interchange agreement, the new curriculum implementation, mental health in schools, as well as the Calgary Police implementation. So overall budget revenue was $38,481,000, and actual revenue came in $272,000 higher at $38,754,000. When we were at third quarter, we had expected revenue to come in at $38,762,000, but we were just shy of that by $8,200, and it actually came in at $38,754,000. It would be nice to say that there was just one line item that accounted for that change, but it was spread amongst all of the line items. And so some of those changes from the third quarter included base instruction funding increasing by $15,000, our services and support line increasing by $14,000, and that includes our First Nation, Métis, Inuit grant, our English as an additional language, and our refugee grant. Teacher salary settlement was an increase of $35,000. And then revenue that we received from children's services also increased by $62,000, and that's the subsidy that we received for those children in school care, as well as the wage top-up that staff are paid that work in that program. Other sales and services saw an increase of $121,000. The parent paid fees for out-of-school care program, graduation, revenue that's earned on graduation, tournaments for sporting teams, as well as the ticket sales for musical productions, all are included in that increase of $121,000. Our investment income saw an increase of $98,000, and that was an increase in interest rates as well as the value of our equity within the USIC, or Urban School Insurance Consortium, had increased by $75,000. So this was offset by funding that had decreased from our third quarter update, which was our instruction fees. Between academy fees and the fees that extracurricular teams were charged, there was a decrease of $202,000. And also with the accounting treatment of a few of our items. So again, with IMR revenue, that revenue line item relates to the amount of IMR projects that we've expensed versus capitalized. And so because there were fewer IMR expenses, our revenue is also $198,000 less, as well as the revenue that we were bringing off those capital grants when we amortize them, that had increased by $22,000 from the projection. When you're looking at this statement, I just wanted to remind you that the funding that we receive from Alberta Education Grants is split between two lines. The Government of Alberta line with $30,412,000, and as well as the property tax line of $4,456,000. So because we're a separate school division and we've opted out of the Alberta School Foundation Fund, we receive our portion of the property taxes from education directly from the municipalities, and because of that, we show that revenue on the property tax lines. Whereas if we were a public school board and had wanted, or we're looking at the statement, the entire $34 million would be reflected in that Government of Alberta revenue line. It's just a quick graph to show where our revenue comes from, and as one would expect, 85% of our revenue comes from Alberta Ed grants, and that's just taking the Alberta Ed line combined with the property tax line. Other government of Alberta is 4.66%, and that's children's services for out-of-school care, subsidies, and wage top-up, as well as Alberta Health, which is the grant that we receive the community together. And then fees account for 2.41% of the revenue. The bottom portion of this statement is our expenses. And again, it's detailed out according to where we spent our money, and on which programs, not what we spent our money on. And again, instruction has been divided between our littlest learners and our older ones. So those that are in kindergarten, that are PUF funded or fall within learning services, severe kindergarten, are on that top line, and then grades 1 through 12 are on the second line. Expenses were budgeted at $38,647,000 and came in $474,000 greater at $39,121,000. At third quarter, we had expected our expenditures to be $39,219,000, which would have led us to a deficit of $456,000. However, expenses came in $97,000 less at $39,121,000, which meant that our deficit was slightly lower at $367,320. Some of the changes that occurred from third quarter were that instruction program expenses were $160,600 higher than expected. Our Chrome Essentials course that we offered over the summer, those expenses came in $43,000 higher than we thought. Certificated leaves relating to EDB and maternity leave were $41,000 more than we expected. SGF expenditures increased by $96,000 within the technology budget. Their projection, actual expenditures were $19,000 greater than the projection due to software, new equipment, and lesser. With one of the leases that we have, the lesser had incorrectly invoiced us the year before, so instead of, and then corrected this year. So instead of having 12 payments, we had 13 for the 23-24 school year. And then learning services exceeded their projection by $35,000, having spent more on PD and new equipment. We also had this offset by some decreases. So within teacher pension and benefits, there was $28,000 less than projected. School expenditures were $37,000 less due to accounting treatment. So we capitalized assets, so they didn't show as an expense on the statement, but rather they're showing on the statement of financial position. And then the nutrition program had savings of $20,800. Plant operations and maintenance expenses were $260,000 lower than expected. Grounds and garbage contracts actually came in $17,000 more than we had thought. But we had savings with the utilities, which can be attributed to the utilization of our building management systems, as well as late winter, early spring. There had been conversations with the city where there was speculation as to whether or not there would be water restrictions. And so because of that conversation, we reduced our watering on the grounds, but also we had a significant increase in rainfall in the spring, and so we weren't needing to water as much as we wanted to do. So in total, that led to savings. Repairs and maintenance, we saw an increase in expenses of $53,000. We're just seeing that overall, there's been an increase in parts that we're sourcing out, as well as contracted services. Inspections had a savings of $8,000. Wages and benefits were $40,000 less than projected. And then within the school consolidation project, it was $20,000 less than projected. So we had $34,000 for the windows in there. However, because those were ultimately capitalized, that ended up decreasing expenditures, but it was offset by $13,000 being spent on fundraising videos and brochures. IMR expenses, again, like we've said before, they were less by $206,000, and so that impacted the expenses for PO&M, but also amortization expense was $19,000 more than we expected. Within transportation, expenses were $28,000 less than expected. We had initially thought that we would be installing GPS units and cameras on the buses. However, these weren't purchased, so the amortization expense wasn't incurred. Within administration, we were $11,000 more than expected. And so there were savings within contracted services and public relations. However, it was offset by overages in dues and fees, legal services, and then PD and travel. When we look at where we spent our money, 75% was spent on construction as we'd expect, 12.9% spent on maintaining our buildings, 5% on transportation, 4.2% on administration, and 2.2% on external services. So again, that's our out-of-school care program and early learning program.
Oh, just a question, man. If you go back to the previous slide, go back one more. Where are we with the administration expenses? I know there's a 5% cap. Where are we? Are we near the cap? Are we?
We actually had a surplus of 36,000 within administration. So there is, you're correct, there is a cap, but we were
Below the cap.
we were below, yeah.
Thank you.
When we look at what we spent our expenses on, 73% was spent on wages between certificated and non-certificated staff, 21.9% on services, contracts, and supplies, 4.9% on amortization. So finally, that led to the deficit of $367,000. We can look at Schedule 3, and that will show us where the deficit and surplus will reside within each of the programs. So the first area of the instruction, you can see between ECS and Platinum. They had a deficit of $8,144. So there was a $4,100 deficit within the school budget, $145,000 surplus in SGF. And then within learning services, we had Severe having a deficit of $159,800, half the deficit of $126,000. And the portion of early learning that's funded through the base grant had a surplus of $97,600. Operations and maintenance had a deficit of $362,000. So in the budget, we had intended to subsidize it by $171,000 at third quarter. That had grown to $230,000, and then adding on the amortization expense from unsupported assets of $87,000 accounts for that difference. Transportation also had a deficit of $128,000. When the budget was prepared, we anticipated that actually being $196,000. But again, without the purchase of the GPS units and the cameras, and then there not being the amortization expenses, that's what brought the deficit lower. System administration had a surplus of $36,000, and then external services had a surplus of $95,000. And finally, schedule of net assets. That's Schedule 1. So just a few pages back if you're following along. Remember from our statement of financial position, we had that large net asset figure of $3,196,000. This is where we dive deeper into that value. So in the third column, you can see that we have our accumulated surplus of $3,196,000. And then next to it is our investment in tangible capital assets of $593,000. That represents the net book value of our board funded asset. So we do have those grants where they're very specific or targeted for capital purchases. However, there's other grants where they're not. And it's us using either that grant funding or other revenue sources to purchase capital assets. Under unrestricted surplus, you can see a value of $576,000. This is similar to your checking account where you have money in the bank or resources available, but you don't really have an earmark for a specific purpose. So they're usually used for emergent needs and whatnot. Our internally restricted operating reserves has a balance of $1,304,000. And so this represents money that we've set aside for a very specific purpose. And on the operating side, that's typically programming needs. And then on the capital side, that would be set aside for the replacement of future assets, and that value is $720,000. Between the unrestricted surplus balance of 576 and the restricted operating reserves of 1,304,000, we have an accumulated surplus of $1,881,000. Typically, when Alberta Ed is referring to this number, they reduce it by our SGF balance, which is $660,000. So our adjusted accumulated operating surplus is $1,221,000. We reflect back on the budget and where we thought our reserves would be. We had anticipated using $244,000 of our operating reserves. We moved $221,000 to capital reserves and then have $944,600 available for 24-25. At third quarter, we had expected to have $1,568,000 available, and that would have included SGF and that balance there. So that's what we're comparing to our accumulated surplus of $1,880,000. The next page of that schedule also shows us where those surpluses or are restricted, the purpose of those surpluses and why they've been restricted. So under instruction, we have $1,177,000. So again, 660 is related to SGF. 531 is the amount of the surpluses that the school budgets have accumulated. BAN program has accumulated $40,000. The SCSL has $21,000 set aside from surplus of international ed. And then we have two programs that are actually in a deficit area, and the first being religious ed. So the fund that religious ed accessed from the international ed surplus, the surplus didn't come in as high as we had expected, and so with them accessing those funds, put them into a deficit. So once the funds from international come in, we'll replenish that balance. And then with Home Essentials, those expenses were incurred. However, based on the weighted moving average funding model, the funding for that course hasn't come through. So once the funding comes through, then we'll be able to clear that balance as well. On the capital side, we have $84,500, and that reflects the money we've set aside for St. Mary's Modular that's being used for childcare purposes. And so as upcoming capital needs come, we have funds set aside for it. Within operations and maintenance, we have $36,000. You can see there that we accessed $57,000. That's for the fleet of trucks that were purchased by maintenance. And then the remaining balance is just what the joint use agreement has generated. There's also $638,000 on the capital reserve within O&M, and that's $505,000 from the sale of the former St. Louis school, as well as $133,000 for the replacement of future assets. We have $90,000 set aside for restricted, from administration surpluses as well. And there's just a few graphs that we're able to look at that kind of tie this information together. So the first one just showing the changes between revenue, expenses, and surplus over the last 5 years. You can see that typically any change within revenue would be related to either grants that were announced or changes within enrollment. And then on the expense side, it's just typically our reaction to the increased enrollment or staffing needs, as well as perhaps any capital projects, and then the resulting surplus or deficit over the years. Our accumulated operating surplus compared to expenditures as a percentage. Typically, Alberta Ed looks at this and would hope for a 5% value. However, we can see it slowly decreasing as the government has been wanting us to use up our reserves. You can see that reflected amongst the rest of the province as well. And that's what I have prepared. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Amanda?
Thank you for the presentation. Just to clarify for the trustees, the page 2 of the audited financial statements is the opinion letter from MNP, and it's a 2-page letter, but the result of that is it's an unqualified opinion, which is a fancy term for it's a clean audit. So we are in a very good position that these financial statements fairly present the financial position of
of the division.
The management letter that was received by us indicated that there were no issues. In fact, on the materiality side of things, there were no errors reported there. So that's another positive thing in our hat. So thanks to Amanda for making sure that was clean. And I would like to publicly state my thanks to Amanda as well as the rest of the financial services team for the fabulous work that they've done all year, which culminates with this clean audit opinion. So thank you very much.
And I would like to, from the board, extend the same thing. Thank you to Greg and Amanda and the whole team. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to say if Greg was paying real close attention, he could make this report as well as Amanda.
It wouldn't be nearly as exciting as anybody.
I'm just kidding.
I think he's trying to be funny again.
Trying to, right?
But it's an awesome job, thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you, Chair, and through the Chair. Just on a personal observation, it isn't all that common for school divisions to get clean audits. Normally, there's some level of recommendations for improvement or changes to procedure or controls that are made. Truthfully, this is the only division I've worked in that consistently gets clean audits every year. So it really is a testament to the work of the people that we have working with us to be able to achieve that.
Amen.
Thank you.
So we need to do this, right?
There is a motion, Chair. The recommended decision for the trustees is be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the 2023-24 audited financial statements and notes to the financial statements, along with the transfers to reserves as presented.
Somebody can move that? Yeah, thank you. And on any discussion? Any questions? All in favor? Thank you. All right, we will go on to annual education results report. Dr. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, attached is our annual education results report. This basically is a consolidated version of the presentation that our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. McGill, gave to trustees at the last board meeting. And so essentially it has all of our provincial results as well as our commentary or reflection on them. Trustees had a chance to review this as part of the board package, and I would be remiss if I didn't share my appreciation to Chelsea for putting this together on a very short timeline, as every year happens, but Chelsea did a wonderful job of grabbing all this information and preparing a beautiful report, and we get congratulated every year by our education manager on the design and layout of the report and its conciseness. So pending any questions that trustees may have, there is a recommended motion be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the 23-24 annual education results report as presented.
So I guess we should do the motion first. Can I have a motion? Deacon Robert, thank you. Any discussion? I too would like to say thank you for this. It's great work. I expect nothing. I'm trying to raise that bar. Yeah.
The bar's been set by.
No, it's very good. Thank you very much. We are represented well, and like Dwayne said, as we go to provincial meetings and stuff, we hear this all the time about Medicine Hat Catholic. Okay, so any questions or all in favor? That's
Sure, I want to point out that we had a visit at our table at the ASBA from the superintendent of Perry Rose, who I found out later was a graduate from McCoy. And she was congratulating us on our accountability and was commenting about how well the division has done. So I thought that was pretty neat that a neighboring superintendent stopped by to offer congratulations on our results. So I guess the short comment there is that other divisions are looking at us. And I guess we're looking at other divisions too. So just a comment from a neighboring superintendent.
Thanks, Dick. Any other comments?
Yep, so if you will maybe notice that one portion just said that it would be approved today, so that was, like, I just have that assumption highlighted there in case there was any problems, so that will be removed, and then the audited financial statements will be included in that, and then this will be submitted to the government later this week.
Perfect, thank you. All right, presentations. St. Pat's out of school care fee schedule adjustment.
They're running just a couple minutes behind,
Okay,
so
they're
maybe
coming?
just take a super
Okay.
quick little break, and as soon as they get here,
Okay.
we will just double check right here, yeah.
Well, I looked at their stuff, it's very interesting actually what they're trying to do. They're trying to sort the sheep and goats.
Nobody's watching today, so I'm not gonna get a text message saying, asking if I really need this snack.
Is your wife messaging you?
I am,
No problem.
I didn't have time to stop for one. My sister's house.
I got a
I always do that and I usually just If you go, you can write it down. You just go to the notes and you pick up a file and you go down to the bottom. It's that simple. Word that We just like.
We're good to go. Check.
Yeah, we don't fool
We're gonna
around.
mess around.
Oh, we're back.
Do I even need to sit down?
You do whatever you want.
No, I
You
know,
can
I
dance
feel-
if you want.
Go ahead. What's that? This is our team.
You could stand it.
Oh, wait, come over here.
Yeah. Okay, we are ready for you guys.
I don't want to stand alone. Come over here.
I don't want to stand alone.
This is Rochelle Harrell, our OSC accountant. Tammy Potter, our OSC coordinator.
Hi.
And, well, I would say I have to stop saying that I've inherited sort of the wonderful large OSC program that we have. And I have to take ownership in saying that this is probably something we probably should have done last year. But I didn't realize that we were going to grow as fast as we have been. And so it was kind of a surprise to us to say, holy, we got to get way better control of our OSC program. Because right now, I was being convinced by many, basically saying, hey, if we keep it the way it is, we're actually really saving our families, not only just money, but the convenience as well of it being sort of like the Fred Flintstone punch in, punch out, use it when you need. But as a business, it's not good business. It's not good management for making sure we've got the correct staff. I think we've stretched the time where we can really support our community as far as having that flexibility. And I think for everyone's sort of own wellness and safety for the kids in the program, we have to cap our program. And so it is, no matter what, it's capped at 117. I brought some information here that we've met with Q, we've met with our child care licensing at the beginning of the year. Because of some class moves, we have to readjust where classes can be used for our capacity in case the gym is not accessible. So I feel like we've done a lot of changes just this year significantly. But that being said, moving to a schedule allows us to sort of solidify staffing, because right now I would say sometimes, well, we have to either always be over or never under.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, I guess, from your perspective?
From my perspective, we've moved from a program where we could paint with the kids and do activities with the kids and do crafts to basically just keeping them safe, making sure they don't get hurt, because there are so many of them. We average 80 to 90 kids in that gym at a time. And so you have to modify what we do. And we've taken away things like some days they don't get sports, because if you put 90 kids in a gym and bring out sports, there's injuries immediately. And so we have to change what we allow them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
So we can't change the number, it's 117, it can't get any larger because for two reasons, we don't have the spaces. And the second one is, we don't have the staff. Probably this is one of the most challenging positions to fill in our division or in our school, is out of school care staffing. Because you're looking for part morning hours, minimal 1 to 2 hours in the morning or in the afternoon. So that's a really tough one to fill, but we have an amazing team at our school, and they've been with us for a long time, and we hope for much longer. Now, the one question that I think was asked is how many families will be affected by this? Can I shoot this your way? You put together the information, I don't want to take the credit.
Pull it up. You
I
can look
have
at
it.
it, because I don't have it.
I have it, Andy.
when
Sorry.
we did a survey though, there was only a couple of families that said, we did a survey on it, kind of, if we change to a scheduled program, if we change and we're charging this amount of dollars, how many of you will stop using it? Are you going to use it for the correct reasons? Are you using it as a play date for your kids? And I had one dad who said, yeah, that's just for play date. Like, because it's convenient and it's cheap. But I only had a couple of families who said, we might have to find a different opportunity or option for the kids.
And I'd say from, we'd have 26 families that only use it randomly. So to me, those would be the ones that would probably find other solutions.
What is your ratio of kids to? 1 to 15.
Depending on ages though, right?
No, we do 1 to 15. I try to do it less because 1 to 15 is very large. It's hard to watch 15 children and make sure 15 children are all safe and appropriately behaved. So,
But that's the legal.
yeah, that's legal.
So we have 26 families that access it only in the morning, 25 that access it only in the after school, and then we have 62 that use it almost every day, full days.
And all of them that do, these people, they would actually be the ones that would be actually saving money versus having to spend more. So
Yeah.
by going to a school fee, we would actually be saving the majority of families money versus more. So,
And probably those 62 families are probably working, right?
Yes.
oh,
Working
I
families,
would imagine
yeah.
so. Or split families too, could be as well.
Yeah.
So we currently have 150 registrations. About a month ago, we capped it as well. In some years, we've been up to 190.
We have 180.
You have 180.
We have 180.
180.
We have 180. The 180 kids or 180 families?
Registrations, families.
Yeah.
So, but again, they're very well aware. We've mentioned that since September at every parent council meeting, it's been a conversation of where we are is up to date. And they're all very aware to know that we are needing to have the new school fee registration. Very similar, we've kitty copied it from St. John Paul, Mother Teresa, and in fact, I feel like we're below most of their fees.
How many families are accessing the subsidy?
I have about 13 families right now.
We do keep monthly tracks of what's the staffing, what's the expenditures. For surely we're in the blue. I wouldn't say we're glorifying in the blue, but I'd rather be in the blue than red. So I feel comfortable saying probably right now at this point of the year, between that $7,000 to $8,000 surplus right now. But you never know what comes your way for the needs of the program or whatever else would come your way. So this way we're not relying on central office for that support. We have our own support in the school.
So what would make your ship sail?
If this was passed so that we could, because we still have December to get through. So right now our plan is we've had close to 100 kids on the worst day that we, not say the worst, the best day. We've had 100 kids at one time, or 108 actually.
I have a lot.
And we can only go to 117. And some of these kids in the morning get dropped off by parents. And so they're coming in without a parent walking in. So if we get to 118, we tell that kid, sorry, you can't come in, you gotta go home. Well, their parents are gone. So right now we do have a plan in the morning that one of our staff will be out front to help talk to them and educate over the month of December. But yeah, we're just gonna pray for less cold weather that we don't hit that risk factor. But again, we can send out lots of communication to very soon, just say a reminder, please only use as needed as we're getting too close to the capacity.
But our numbers this year have jumped after school significantly. In years past, I've been there for many years, and we never would really go over like 50 kids, and now we're going to 84 kids is between 70 and 85 is average. If we hit 50, we're like, whoo, it's a quiet day in here.
So right now, Tammy is kind of staffing day to day, week to week, versus how we could be staffing month to month, probably is a better business, to be honest, is what we should be doing. So, yeah. And so the thing is, the urgency of it getting passed, I was hoping so that we could get these plans ready so we could be ready by January 6th for when we return. Because in our programs, all of our programs, it says you need 30 days notification, right? So our 30 days is coming up really close, December 6th, for the kids to return on January 6th. So as soon as we would get your approval, we would be communicating with one another, coming up with a plan, and then communicating that with our parents. Everybody would have to redo the out-of-school care program registration, but they know that. It's been said many times. And it would be first come, first served basis. But I'm very comfortable to say that whoever's going to be now registering, they're committed for every day. And now they know that if they don't commit every day, they're actually paying for days that they're not here. And that would probably put those play dates back home. So that's where we're at. I don't really think we're gonna have too many families looking for different options.
We have,
How do you monitor the number of kids that you have? Is there someone
Right
always
now,
on the school? Yeah, counting them?
right now, kids are coming in, we're comfortable with what's sort of been traditionally working.
It's drop-in. It's drop-in. We
It's
monitor the numbers as the kids come in. We have a whiteboard. So we have someone who's constantly counting. We know the number of the children who are currently in the program.
I think there's
It's on
only,
the whiteboard.
I think there's only us and St. Michael's that
And my
are doing
log
it this
sheet.
way. St. Michael's doing it this way, I think, as well.
But they have a smaller
They
population,
have a small
so
population.
they can,
I mean, this is one big draw for the school too, to be honest, is our school care program. So, I mean, to make it know, I think parents knowing that, hey, they're secure, they have a place, that's a bonus to it as well. They have a spot. So, yeah, very.
So in general, just for my own clarification, so you said most parents, if they were going to use it on a daily basis, they would actually save money over a drop-in basis.
Going by the numbers we have here, yeah, you'd be moving, so if you were full mornings, you're moving from paying currently 210 to 255, you say 55 bucks. If you're a PM afternoon, 236.25, you're going down to 200, so you're saving $36.
And you mentioned that some subsidies are there.
Subsidies there for any family that's able to apply.
Okay,
It's covered, and we've always provided that information on all of our registrations. The links are there. We always say contact Rochelle. Rochelle will call the families. We've had families come into the school. Rochelle will sit down with them. So there is support, holding hands if need be.
and at 2 or 3 parent council meetings, you said this is where we're intending to go, this is what we want to
100%.
do.
Everything's documented if you wish in my admin reports.
No, I'm just, so that, because I think I made the comment that I'm going, well, we're kind of changing horses in midstream by changing our funding model, and it could put some parents in a difficult position. And I'm just looking at it and going, if there are parents who can't meet that, there is something that they can apply for that likely they'll be subsidized to.
Well, and it could also help them because right now they don't, their amount that they owe vary month to month depending on their usage, whereas this way they're paying a flat fee every month. And they know what that fee is ahead of time because that's what they've signed up for. So then they can kind of budget knowing on that number.
And as you presented it, there wasn't any pushback, no parents going, oh, this.
I think the only thing is some of them just worry that they think that they won't get theirs in on time to be in there. But I think we feel very confident that we have less than 117 that are fully committed to time slots, either morning, afternoon, or both. So I'm very comfortable saying that everybody will get their spot.
and the only concerns that I've had from parents is, when are you gonna do this? Is my kid in the program? When are you gonna do this? Is my kid in the program?
It's more about filtering the play dates out,
Right.
to be honest.
How do you come up with the 117? Is that a legal
Licensing.
number?
Licensing.
Yeah,
Licensing number.
so, licensing would set that, and capacity in your gym is set by your fire department.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've asked to see if we can get it increased, but even if we increase it, then we have to find staffing as well, that's tough.
It's happening. So do you think, is anybody you're gonna have to sit down and say, can't bring your kids here anymore?
I don't think so. I've had, out of all of this, I've had one parent come to me and ask me, can you please explain to me why we're doing this? And so very much of how we explained it to you. She sent her husband in to come ask. So, yeah, and so I talked to Dan and he said, yeah, I totally understand and thank you very much. So,
And really, that's what the program is for.
100%.
It's not for play dates.
It's not, I mean, it's to support the kids in our school, right? And to support families that need it, that are either working or other commitments, childcare or whatever.
So the hope is January.
January 6th is when everybody knows we'd like it to start. That was shared back in October or late September. So the intent was that we would start this in January, knowing that there was a process to it. So,
And the parents are expecting that to happen.
and that's all in the
That's what we keep
documentation
saying.
of the letters
It'll
that
be in the
we
new
get.
year. It'll be in the new year.
So.
Okay.
I apologize for coming late in the game to join where everybody else sort of was a few years ago. But again, I felt like we were supporting the flexibility of our community at that time. So this is now a me problem and trying to figure it out. So,
Well, you start getting on the same bus as the rest of the schools.
100%. And that's why I feel comfortable using sort of what they had. And at first, you know, it was Andrea and these ladies saying, I think you're charging too much. I'm like, I'm going by our sister schools here. And then we actually broke down and divided by the minutes. Our minutes were actually a little less, so it made sense that we needed to lower ours as well. So I felt like we really dove into the numbers, the data, and yeah, we're putting out a fair number there. Every month we look at expenditures and staffing, and if I'm too much in the blue, we'll lower it. If we're too much in the red.
If,
Thanks for your presentation. I think at the last meeting, well, I know at the last meeting, there was a little bit of resistance to this. And one of the reasons was, as Bernie mentioned, that we were kind of changing the rules partway through the game.
Yeah.
But from your presentation, I have no reservations to support this.
Well, and I feel bad for Greg. I know we put this all on you to share, and it's one of those ones where you've got the story, but it's all in writing versus the picture, right? So I appreciate for Greg stepping in for us and delivering it, but I know that was tough too, so I apologize for that. Yeah, but thank you. If we are moving forward, sorry.
Well, it's going to be in the motion, but I will certainly support it.
any other questions or comments? I too would like to thank you guys for coming and clarifying what's happening. I'm a former St. Pat's teacher, so I've seen that program, and there wasn't as many kids there as there is now, and it was chaos then, so you got my vote.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Do we want to do the motion right away while they're here, or, okay, let's do, can I get someone to move this? Deacon Robert, thank you. Any questions or comments? All in favor? There, you're done.
I feel like I need a pair of scissors and a ribbon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Wait till you get by those parents that don't like it.
That's right. Thank you guys. All right. Do you ladies want
Well, that was easy. Okay, we are at closing prayer. Deacon Robert.
I did. So, does everybody have it?
Yes.
Okay, we'll pray together in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Carry on your ministry, Lord. Thank you for being with us during this meeting, around and out in our thoughts, words, and actions. Stay with us now as we leave this meeting and return to our respective lives. Help us to keep you as you are now in our thoughts, words, and actions. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, there, do you guys want this back?
That is yours. If you want to frame, we can get that.
Yeah, I'm probably my midnight reading.